My sister-in-law emptied her luggage in our family room. My spouse declared, "She's residing here from now on. If you're unhappy with it, feel free to depart." I responded, "Fine by me." Then I exited the residence, which was a leased property under my name, ended the rental agreement, and relocated, allowing the property owner to remove the unauthorized occupants. To clarify, I'm not the type who simply accepts disrespect without standing up. I'm 32, employed in the banking sector with a solid income. Wed to Emily, 30, for 3 years. We lease a comfortable 2-bedroom unit in the urban area since we're accumulating funds for a home deposit. The rental contract is solely in my name due to Emily's past credit problems when we began cohabiting. Not severe, just some delayed payments from university days, but approval was simpler using only my earnings and credit rating. She contributes half the rent to me monthly, and we divide the bills. Fairly typical arrangement. Emily's mother, Margaret, is quite a character. She's 58, has gone through 2 divorces, and possesses this victim mentality where all her misfortunes are blamed on others. She was fired because her supervisor was envious. The property manager ousted her due to gender bias. Struggles to secure a new residence because society discriminates against unmarried females. You see the pattern. Over the last year, Margaret has been shifting between her siblings' home and different acquaintances' sofas, always with some pitiful tale about why her current spot isn't workable. The sibling consumes alcohol excessively, the friends are exploiting her, her spine aches from couch surfing. Classic coercive strategies. Emily experiences remorse about her mother's plight, which I comprehended somewhat. When Margaret required assistance with food or fuel costs, Emily would transfer her $100 occasionally. I wasn't thrilled, but it didn't strain our finances, so I kept quiet. The issues arose when Margaret began suggesting she relocate with us. Remarks about her isolation, how she longed for quality time with Emily, how pleasant our unit was. Emily would divert the topic, but I sensed she was under duress. 2 months back, Margaret intensified the emotional manipulation. Began phoning Emily in tears about resting in her vehicle or lacking funds for meals. Emily would return home distressed, discussing how terrible she felt for her mother. I proposed we aid Margaret in locating a small studio or shared living setup, but Emily claimed her mother couldn't manage anything suitable. I firmly stated that Margaret joining us wasn't feasible. We scarcely had room for ourselves, and I had no desire to cohabit with my mother-in-law forever. Emily concurred initially, noting her mother should handle her circumstances maturely, but Margaret persisted. Started appearing at our location without notice, lingering for meals, then fabricating reasons to remain longer. Oh, her vehicle fails to start, or she's exhausted for driving, or she left an item at her acquaintance's spot. Constant excuses for not departing after visiting hours. Emily began mentioning how we possessed an unused extra bedroom, how it appeared self-centered to possess all this area while her mother faced hardships. I recalled that extra bedroom served as my workspace where I operated remotely 2 days weekly. We discussed this previously. 3 weeks prior, Margaret contacted Emily in a frenzy, claimed her acquaintance expelled her abruptly and she had no alternative destination, pleaded to remain with us briefly while sorting matters. Emily was emotional, inquiring if we could assist her mother. Despite my reservations, I consented to a maximum of 3 days. Margaret could rest on the fold-out sofa in the family room while contacting others for alternatives. I emphasized this was short-term, and she must secure another spot by week's end. Margaret arrived that night with far more belongings than needed for a 3-day visit. Several bags, containers of private possessions, even minor furnishings. When I noted the volume of items, she explained she had to transport everything since no other storage existed. The initial warning sign was how swiftly she settled in. Reorganized the family room setup, shifted our items to accommodate hers, began preparing meals in our cooking area as if she'd resided there forever. When I noted she should be seeking other accommodations, she mentioned she was dialing contacts but nothing materialized yet. Day 3 passed without Margaret departing. When I inquired about her advancements, she stated the housing market was challenging and she required additional time. Emily supported her, asserting we couldn't abandon her mother homeless. I reiterated to both that this was meant to be brief. By week's conclusion, Margaret had fully dominated the family room. Her garments scattered about, she'd adjusted the furnishings to her liking, and our side table was littered with her pills and personal effects. Returning from the office felt like entering another's dwelling. Margaret also began behaving as if she was a permanent resident. Remarked on my food choices, faulted my dishwasher loading method, informed Emily I was viewing television at high volume. When I highlighted she was a visitor, she replied that relatives shouldn't cause discomfort to one another. Week 2 was when I drew the line. Informed Emily her mother must depart by the next Sunday or I'd go insane. The ongoing company of an extra individual in our compact area was maddening, and Margaret's demeanor worsened each day. Emily requested extra time, claiming her mother was diligently searching for a place, but all options were overpriced or in unsafe zones. I recommended Margaret explore subsidized housing or cohabitants, but Emily said that wasn't practical for a person of her mother's years. That weekend, Emily and Margaret searched for units jointly, returned reporting that all viewed properties were either too costly, too cramped, or in neighborhoods Margaret deemed risky. Emily was anxious and remorseful, and Margaret amplified her victim role. Monday dawn, I arose to Margaret preparing breakfast in our cooking space at 6 a.m. When I questioned her early rise, she said she was packing Emily's work meal because mothers do such things. I reminded her Emily is grown and can prepare her own. Margaret became protective, stating she was merely attempting to assist during her stay in our residence, that it's instinctive for her to nurture her child. I noted she wasn't staying. She was supposed to locate her own residence. That's when she revealed the surprise. Stated Emily had assured her she could remain indefinitely because kin support kin, that I ought to back my spouse's choice to aid her mother rather than being greedy about area. I promptly phoned Emily at her job to verify what she'd truly said. Emily confessed she informed her mother of an extended stay, but insisted she believed I approved since I hadn't commented for 2 weeks. I recalled I'd been questioning Margaret's exit daily. We engaged in a major dispute that evening. Emily charged me with being unsympathetic and lacking comprehension of familial devotion. I explained I grasped family but distinguished between brief aid and permitting permanent residency without consultation. Margaret overheard the entire disagreement from the family room, then interjected, stating she didn't wish to create issues but had no alternative, that she'd attempted all possibilities and this was her sole choice. Emily began weeping, and I realized I was faltering in this conflict. The following morning, I discovered Margaret examining our correspondence. When I asked her actions, she said she sought a parcel she'd ordered to arrive there. I informed her she lacked authority to handle our mail, and certainly shouldn't direct deliveries to our location without approval. She adopted an attitude, claiming she was simply being productive and I was overreacting. That typical folks don't object to relatives assisting with minor chores like organizing letters. I told her she wasn't a relative. She was an undesired temporary visitor who'd exceeded her stay. Emily returned to us quarreling and promptly sided with her mother. Said I was harsh and irrational, and Margaret was only attempting to assist. I highlighted that inspecting another's mail unpermitted isn't assistance. It's violating confidentiality. That's when Emily delivered her own surprise. Stated perhaps Margaret should simply reside permanently since she evidently couldn't finance independent living. That we possessed the room and it would resolve all concerns. I gazed at her as if she'd gone mad. I informed Emily no scenario existed where her mother relocated permanently, that I'd never consented and wouldn't coexist with my mother-in-law endlessly. Emily said I was self-absorbed and that wedded pairs compromise for kin. The dispute intensified with Emily accusing me of indifference toward her or her kin. Said a decent spouse would desire to support his wife's mother during hardship. I told her a decent spouse wouldn't surprise her partner with lasting visitors without dialogue. Margaret reclined on the sofa throughout this clash, appearing satisfied, as if relishing our division. When Emily wept, Margaret inserted herself, saying she never intended to disrupt, but occasionally kin must sacrifice for one another. I retired furious and awoke Thursday dawn to find Margaret had introduced additional items into our family room. Not merely personal objects, but furnishings, as if establishing lasting occupancy. When I queried the source, she said her acquaintance delivered it. That night, I informed Emily this had escalated excessively. Margaret was obviously intending permanent stay despite my protests, and our modest unit couldn't sustain 3 grown-ups long-term. Emily said her mother merely needed stability and safety. Friday morning, I descended to discover Margaret reorganizing our kitchen storage. She'd relocated our plates to alternate racks and restructured everything per her tastes. When I inquired her doings, she said she was enhancing the area's efficiency. I instructed her to restore all to original positions because this wasn't her cooking space. She said she was only trying to assist, and I should value someone skilled in proper arrangement. I said I valued her departure. Emily arrived to see me restoring items while Margaret grumbled about my dominance. Emily asked the occurrence, and Margaret portrayed it as if I'd assaulted her for attempting household aid. That's when Emily uttered something transformative. She stared directly and said, "Mother is residing here now. She lacks other options, and this is familial duty. If you can't accept that, perhaps you should seek alternative lodging." I couldn't fathom her words. My spouse of 3 years was basically selecting her scheming mother over me and instructing me to vacate my own residence. The residence I funded, the contract I endorsed, the spot I'd occupied for 2 years prior to Margaret's arrival. I observed both awaiting my concession and regret. Margaret with her triumphant look as if she'd succeeded. Emily with folded arms as if challenging opposition. Both anticipating my surrender and acceptance of this absurd setup. Instead, I said agreed. Their stunned expressions were invaluable. Emily began retracting, claiming she didn't intend that meaning, and we required rational discussion. Margaret appeared less triumphant and more anxious, as if this deviated from her scheme. I told Emily she'd clarified her decision, and I was honoring it. Proceeded upstairs and commenced packing attire and vital papers. Emily trailed, imploring composure and thorough talk. I said discussion was unnecessary. Contacted my friend Alex, who has an extra chamber, and asked if I could stay briefly. He agreed readily and proposed aiding my relocation. I informed him I'd arrive shortly with necessities. During packing, Emily sobbed, questioning how I could forsake our union over a residency matter. I told her she'd forsaken our union by preferring her mother to her spouse, that she'd demonstrated my priority level. Margaret attempted sudden mediation, saying perhaps alternative resolutions existed, that she didn't aim to dismantle our union and could intensify her search for independent living. Insufficient and belated, madam. I completed packing and approached the exit. Emily was distraught, inquiring my destination and return time. I said I was heading to Alex's and would return tomorrow for remaining items. She pleaded against departure, but I was finished. Passed the weekend at Alex's contemplating subsequent steps. Phoned my attorney Monday dawn to review separation processes and discovered intriguing details about our rental status. As the lease was exclusively mine, I held legal authority to conclude it with adequate warning. I also learned Emily and Margaret would qualify as unapproved residents if I withdrew from the contract. The property owner could expel them promptly since they weren't listed and lacked legal occupancy rights. Tuesday dawn, I returned to the unit during Emily's work hours. Margaret was present, behaving as the household matriarch, viewing television in sleepwear. She attempted dialogue about reconciliation, but I disregarded her and collected more possessions. I observed she'd implemented further alterations, shifted furnishings, displayed images on walls, and generally conducted herself as owner. When I remarked, she said she was merely ensuring comfort since this was her residence now. That's when I opted for extreme measures, contacted the leasing firm, and sought premature contract and due to unresolvable cohabitation shifts. Detailed that I was the only renter and would abandon the site after 30 days. They verified the penalty and stated they'd dispatch formal notification to the site. I also contacted services under my name and arranged cutoff for identical date. Power and web were mine. Heating and television were Emily's, so she'd manage those independently. That night, I returned for additional items and informed Emily of the contract end. She erupted, yelling I couldn't expel them. I recalled she'd instructed my departure if displeased with the setup. Emily implored reconsideration, saying her mother lacked alternatives and they needed extended period for solutions. I told her they possessed 30 days, exceeding Margaret's initial requirement for arrangements. Margaret interjected, claiming I was spiteful and brutal by penalizing them for familial efforts. I told her she wasn't my kin and never would be, that she'd schemed into my residence and ruined my union accordingly. The ensuing weeks were turmoil. Emily phoned relentlessly, begging reversal of the contract end. Margaret evidently devoted time to weeping and portraying victimhood to listeners. Emily's sibling even contacted to berate my callousness. I remained firm, located a pleasant single bedroom near my workplace, and signed a contract solely mine. Relocated all personal effects and furnishings I'd contributed to the partnership from the prior site during their absence. Left them with Emily's furnishings and the 30-day warning. Emily attempted all tactics to alter my stance. Vowed Margaret would depart upon my return. Claimed they'd secured her mother a unit and merely needed brief extension. Proposed covering contract cancellation costs for decision reversal. I told her it was overdue. The property owner confirmed Emily and Margaret attempted lease addition but failed qualification without my primary role. They also couldn't sustain the rent on Emily's earnings alone even if approved. Day 30 came, and the property owner issued a directive to vacate within 3 days. Absent new contract or tenancy proof, they had to leave. Emily phoned frantically, stating they were compelled out without destination. I reminded her Margaret was allegedly adept at securing spots quickly. It emerged Margaret's acquaintance circle diminished rapidly for enduring housing versus sympathy stops. Remarkable how many suddenly lacked room when she required permanent storage. Emily ultimately relocated temporarily with her sibling, while Margaret went to reside with her alternate child in another region. The union was clearly finished, and I engaged a separation attorney the next week. The ordeal cost approximately $3,000 in premature contract penalties and relocation fees, but it justified every cent to flee that ordeal. Emily attempted to assert abandonment, but legally I'd provided appropriate warning and adhered to contract stipulations. Margaret reportedly informs all listeners I'm a wicked individual who cast them homeless. Conveniently omits her uninvited entry into my residence and my spouse's preference for her over me. Astonishing how narratives shift in the teller's favor. Emily's sibling continues dispatching hostile notes about demolishing their kin, but truthfully their kin was already disordered. I merely ceased facilitating it. Margaret nurtured a child who deemed surprising her partner with enduring visitors as proper conduct. 2 months on, and I'm thriving in my fresh sight. Seeing a new person who views relocating parents without consultation as absurd. Amusing how ordinary individuals grasp fundamental partnership limits. Emily sought reconciliation months ago, admitting errors and desiring resolution. I told her the error was wedding someone ignorant that partners precede parents. That opportunity had passed. My attorney stated the separation concluded last month. Emily received no support payments since she opted to favor her mother over our union. She bore her legal costs as she sparked the split by directing my exit. The finest aspect is recognizing Margaret's scheme rebounded entirely. She believed she could coerce gratis lodging and instead demolished her child's union. Now she's cohabiting with her other offspring, who evidently enforces firmer limits. Some believe I was overly severe, but I differ. Emily issued an ultimatum, and I challenged her assumption. She assumed I'd yield and embrace her desired setup, but discovered some resist manipulation. The contract end was fully lawful, and I supplied adequate warning. If they desired continuance, they should have considered before instructing the rent payer to depart. Deeds yield outcomes even unexpectedly. Solitary living is truly wonderful. No conflicts, no scheming, no unauthorized rearrangements. Merely tranquility in a truly personal domain. Occasionally, the optimal retribution is distancing from harmful individuals. Margaret discovered that toying with another's housing can rebound dramatically. Emily discovered preferring parents to partners ruins unions. I discovered excising harmful folks promptly enhances well-being. Would I manage differently retrospectively? Likely would have ended the contract during Margaret's first overstay week. Might have avoided much tension by acting earlier rather than attempting empathy. The ordeal instructed trusting gut feelings about individuals and scenarios. When someone reveals their nature via deeds, accept it initially. Avoid awaiting repeated proofs as I did. My fresh partner finds the tale comical. States any female preferring her mother to her spouse merits precisely what Emily received. It's pleasant with someone comprehending standard partnership priorities finally. Emily remains with her sibling from latest reports, evidently struggling romantically as males avoid her kin turmoil. Inconceivable why anyone would hesitate entering that chaos. The leased property acquired fresh occupants within a month post-departure. Pleasant youthful duo who comprehend respecting contracts and limits. The property owner expressed relief for dependable renters after our ordeal. Margaret sporadically attempts social media connection, which I disregard and obstruct instantly. Some never grasp that destroying connections yields lasting repercussions. She chose to ruin my union and now endures the fallout. Finest choice ever was escaping that harmful setup instead of mending unfixable individuals. Occasionally, the sole victorious strategy is avoiding the contest altogether.